researchers and scientists. For example, I'm a stakeholder in the digitization process that has a real interest in the digitization of my collection. If I'm the curator at Collection U. Alternatively, there might be groups that are really interested in um, specimens that were collected of the biota of a particular location rather than having any real interest in where those specimens are curated. The community in the US has taken the approach of um, forming thematic collections networks that are asking big research questions of the data as it's digitized in particular parts of this specimen space. This is a slice of that specimen space that might be of interest to a group that's focused on the biota of a particular location. Oftentimes, an additional axis here is the the location of the specimens in the tree of life. But there are other stakeholders in the process of digitization that are interested in other slices of these of specimen space. And that's been well demonstrated by the success of some of the crowdsourcing platforms in recent years that were created for this domain. Notes from Nature is something that I'll talk about today. There are others. Notes from Nature has had some significant success engaging over 9,000 contributors in over 1.3 million transcriptions in the last 3 years, which I would say is very encouraging. If we engage people outside of the scientific community in the process of digitization because of their interest in particular slices of that specimen space, we further digitization, but we also further some other things that are important that we would not necessarily get otherwise. Sustainability of digitization activities is one that is beyond the funding from federal or state or local agencies for the digitization activities. Community support for collections. If you're making an effort to engage your community in the process through events that bring them on site, that give them that provide information about the importance of the collections for research, and finally STEM literacy, giving the public an opportunity to participate in genuine science. I'm going to talk about these three things in this order, and the reason for that is that each gives context for the next thing. So I'll talk about iDigBio just very briefly because Libby talked about it perhaps 2 months ago. Then I'll talk about Notes from Nature as an example of one of these transcription platforms. And finally, I'll talk about BioSpecs, and BioSpecs will get the most time. Now, the on-ramp that I was referring to in the title to the talk actually runs in the reverse direction. BioSpecs can be used to onboard specimen sets at Notes from Nature. Once they're on Notes from Nature, then you can engage people during the iDigBio event. So let's start with iDigBio. iDigBio is relatively new. It came out of a 2014 hackathon that occurred involving a number of different projects, including Notes from Nature, Digivol, which is another one of these transcription platforms that engages volunteers in the creation of digital information about our specimens, and Smithsonian's Transcription Center, another one of these transcription platforms. These aren't the only three, but they are the three that I'll mention at the moment. Engage the world in the digitization of biodiversity specimens, uh, particularly during this 4-day event. We had a 4-day event in 2015 that Libby talked about. Um, the iDigBio.org site was a locus for a lot of that activity. It provided a dashboard and also the progress across these 5 participating transcription platforms. Anybody who had an internet connection could participate in the transcriptions from anywhere, but we also hosted, the community hosted almost 30 on-site events that brought people into collections to introduce them to the collection and the importance of those collections for research and education and all those things that we often identified as being important. There were resources provided to event hosts, including games at WeDigBio.org and a checklist for preparing for events, on-site events. The games are meant to be fun, but they're also meant to engage people in the process, to give them some uh, reason to think more deeply about what they're seeing and begin to build um, or at least recognize that they're building an aggregate picture of the uh, diversity and distribution of the world's biota. Social media buzz was really important, and we had stickers and we had temporary tattoos that were very popular during the event, and we'll have that again this year. I want to especially mention that the um, stakeholders in digitization, that is, people who are interested in those slices of uh, specimen space as defined by relevant axes, um, those stakeholders do include potentially educators. And what we would really like to be doing is um, recruiting large groups to um, do digitization of those slices of specimen space. And we think that educators are potentially a big win for us. Something's happening to my screen. I'll just proceed. Yeah, something's happening to my screen. It just got quite small, but I'll just keep talking. The During the iDigBio event, we had 2 classroom events at a local school for middle schoolers, and um, they were involved in transcription and notes from nature. They also got a virtual tour of the Smithsonian, and you can see that on the screen on the left. We think that we can generate significant social buzz this year by taking the technology that is in the Libraries of Life augmented reality mobile app that Ann Basham has developed, and making it work with those same tattoos to do something really neat, which would be to allow a user to look through their mobile device at their arm and see a mantis or something else sitting on it. We had fantastic digitization rates during iDigBio, and you can see here it increased the transcription rates by an order of magnitude in this particular group of specimens that I'm really interested in, herbarium transcriptions on notes from nature. And there was some lingering effect on the baseline. That is, we increased the baseline rate of transcriptions at notes from nature for those particular specimens after iDigBio. And we're really interested in maintaining this high rate of digitization throughout the year. And we had a meeting recently to plan iDigBio 2016, and we think that we can do that by supporting these stakeholders in digitization by providing resources to them as what might be thought of as WeDig interest groups. These interest groups might be defined based on collection location. I have a particular example that I'll mention now that is along that axis of what I'm thinking about is specimen space. This is the WeDig FL Plants partnership with the Florida Native Plant Societies, over 30 chapters. And this group is primed to transcribe specimens of specimens that were collected in Florida, irrespective of where they're curated. So we might, in fact, um, this group might in fact be transcribing specimens from a Mexican herbarium or an Australian herbarium to build a more complete historic picture of the diversity and distribution of plants in Florida. There are These are some examples of what we thought about as potential interest groups. WeDig pathogens, WeDig Chicago, WeDig pollinators. I want to shift to talking a little bit about Notes from Nature. Notes from Nature uh, will undergo has undergone a transformation between version 1 and version 2. Version 2 is going to be released tomorrow if all goes according to plan, and it's going to permit um, easier onboarding of projects and also allow for greater flexibility in the circumscription of specimen sets to transcribe. So this is from version 1. Um, this is where we got version 1, 2 in the last 3 years, to the point where you could say, okay, I'm really interested in helping out Florida State University's herbarium. And I click on that tile, and then I'm just transcribing Florida State University herbarium specimens. I'll show you how that differs in a slide or two. This is the screenshot from a beta test that happened 2 weeks ago for the new version 2, and this is the an example of where we're at with this. We are now allowing users to circumscribe the specimen sets in ways that they think will be compelling and interesting to their the people that they're appealing to for the transcriptions. Either it's the world, or maybe it's a particular interest group. In this case, we have 2 WeDig FL plants, what we're calling expeditions. One is focused on the mints of Florida, and one is focused on laurels of Florida. And I thought it was kind of interesting. I created both of these, and one I said more than mojitos in the title of the mints, which is playful more than anything else. And the other was a call to fight for the survival of the laurels, and that one actually was more popular. There was a choice that a volunteer had in which they participated in. If you're not familiar with Notes from Nature, I just have some screenshots here. The user is shown an image of the specimen, and they are asked to provide information that can be found on the specimen. In this case, it's all from the label. So the user would go to the zoom into the label and determine what the country of the collection locality is, the state, and the county. BioSpecs and Notes from Nature have funding through NSF's Advances in Biological Informatics to create interoperability between the two projects to make onboarding of those kinds of expeditions much easier. And BioSpecs has a broader vision that I'll show you here in a second in a list. But BioSpecs comes out of a workshop that happened in 2012 that brought together a, a bunch of different groups. It was um, people who develop specimen data management systems, people who are doing digitization well, um, leaders in digitization protocols, uh, people who are doing citizen science well, and these were not all from our domain. Some of them were well outside of our domain. And we just didn't, we assessed what the state of things uh, was, and we recognized, among other things, that in the future it'd be nice to have a system that would do these four things: lower the barriers to the creation and management of online public participation projects, make data flow more easily among relevant actors, then back to the collections, curating the physical specimens with provenance information, build capacity for recruiting and engaging with public participants, and finally, enable co-created citizen science projects. That language might not be familiar to you. Co-created citizen science projects are those that engage volunteers or the general public in more of the process of science than just treating them as a kind of sophisticated science instrument as you find in contributory citizen science. That is not to say that contributory citizen science isn't enjoyed or important, um, but there was recognition that uh, there were greater advances in STEM literacy with co-created citizen science than with collaborative or contributory citizen science. And that's what we're trying to do with We Dig FL Plants. We're trying to um, partner with an amateur enthusiast group, and in fact might in the end be multiple amateur enthusiast groups who are all interested in advancing digitization for this particular flora to address uh, research questions. That's something that we talk about in conversations. You know, what are the relevant uh, outcomes of um, what are the outcomes, potential outcomes of this process that would get this group really excited. So ISPEX is this answer to the need that we recognized in the 2012 workshop. Biospecs is at biospecs.org. You can go there and try it out. Um, we have prepared for more traffic in the next few days because there's going to be some amount of um, collaborative press releases between Biospecs and the new version of Notes from Nature. Biospecs is not itself a crowdsourcing platform. Instead, it's created for those of us that would like to manage these projects, and it provides tools for those managers to um, bundle things up and send them off and then keep track of things. I'll show you that there's also a public side to this that the crowdsourcing community would visit, um, but I'll describe that later. Uh, we created a system where the group users join groups, and groups can be just one person. There's not a need for multiple people in a group, but groups manage projects. So if you have something like We Dig FL Plants, you might have in your group um, some Florida curators, and you coordinate Plant Society. In the end, it might also be the Ag Extension Office and the Florida Wildflower Federation. Um, but you can co-manage these projects as a group. You can see a group invite code there. That is if you are joining at the invitation of someone who's already created a group. You would put that in there and you'd automatically join that group at the time of registration. I'm in 3 groups. These groups are managing, some of these groups are managing projects that I have. And I have these 5 projects. Some of these were, 2 of these were experiments, but 3 of them are active projects with expeditions, either active on Notes from Nature or in the past. You create a project, and there's information that you will provide, and this takes some wordsmithing. You want to be, you want things to look professional. You want to describe your project in a compelling way, because once you've done this, a, a public page will be minted for this project that can be linked to from the crowdsourcing platforms. In the course of creating the project, you choose a workflow, and at the moment we have 2 active actors that can be combined in our workflows. One is an OCR web service that we manage at iDigInfo. Another is the Notes from Nature version 2, which is in the screenshot called Notes from Nature Panoptes. We will retire Notes from Nature Legacy as something that you can choose, because that's no longer going to be relevant once version 2 is released. So this is a project page, and you can see I have these expeditions that are associated with the project. If you click on the link up here on the upper right, you get to see the public page that's minted for the world. These partnerships that are these interest groups. You could imagine an ad hoc approach to putting these descriptions of them one place or another, depending on which interest group it is. This could have had a tome at the Florida Native Plant Society website, but then there would be a need to get their IT support's attention whenever changes were made. The next project might put it somewhere else, but we saw a lot of value in combining these in BioSpecs, because we can provide tools that are of common value to everyone. That's what you get when you click on these information icons at Notes from Nature. You go to this page, and it provides some additional context for the importance of the contributions that the transcribers are making. You also, once you have it described in BioSpecs, you have the ability to create a download file for advertisement of the project at some of the go-to sites for people to find out about citizen science projects to which they can contribute. There's a standard that is followed by these aggregators, and we provide the information in that standard as JSON. For example, you can post a SciStarter with that JSON. It's fairly simple. Back to this example project, the way in which you get subjects in the project to be wrapped, bundled as specimen sets as expeditions. And I should say that this is language. The idea that these units of work, these bundles, are called expeditions, actually comes from the Digivol group, the Atlas of Living Australia, who had the idea to call them expeditions to add more excitement to the process. And in fact, BioSpecs stands for Biodiversity Specimen Digitization Expedition. We don't have digitization as a word represented there, but we do have the other ones. So if you want to import subjects, uh, you can do that in three ways at the moment. Um, Biospecs is useful to you at the stage at which you've answered some important questions. Uh, One is, you know, what specimen data management system am I going to use? Another is what globally unique identifier um, protocol will I use? Um, Another is where will I make my images public online? Um, because once you've answered those questions and you've created records in your specimen data management system and you've linked them to the images online, that's when you're ready for biospecs. Those records can be very skeletal. It can just be a matter of creating them so that you have the globally unique identifiers to associate with them, and so that we can carry those through this whole pipeline. But those specimen data management systems, um, all of the major ones produce Darwin Core archives. You can export your record set that includes the access URLs for the images in that Darwin Core archive format and upload it to Biospecs here. If all of this sounds like um, a, a lot and new to you, I encourage you to rely on the Small Collections Network. This is something that Gil Nelson, who I see is on the webinar, can help you with. Um, these are early steps in the digitization process, and we we value the contributions of our volunteers. We think that it's important that everybody is committed to the creation of openly accessible digital data about the specimens. I think that the volunteers deserve that when they're putting time into it. So we are asking you to have thought relatively deeply about how you're going to serve the data that they're helping you create. In fact, it's really simple. If you're a herbarium in North America, um, there's a Symbiota portal set up for you. Um, the protocol that I'm going to show you just in a few screenshots here involving CERNEC will be similarly useful to you if you're in that portal. And there are probably analogous portals for other groups focused on different taxa. So CERNEC is a project involving over 100 herbaria in the southeast that are imaging their specimens with the intention of crowdsourcing the transcriptions. Portal, you can search the portal. In this case, I'm searching just the CERNEC data, and I'm searching for things that are from Florida, from the county, my home county, Leon County, and those that have specimen images associated with them. The result is that I have 1,243 specimens. They're from a bunch of different collections. Maybe I'm thinking about creating an expedition for a digitization party that I'm going to host involving my local chapter of my Florida Native Plant Society. I click on the um, export or download icon up there on the upper right, and I can download from there Darwin Core archive. I can upload that to Biospecs using the import Darwin Core file on the upper left there. And this upload process is fairly fast. If you have OCR as part of your workflow, there will be depending on the size, the number of subjects that you've just uploaded, there will be a potentially multi-hour lag as the web service crunches through your files. and does optical character recognition, which is picking out text in the image. If your skeletal records are really skeletal, all you really did was create a record. You didn't provide um, the species, you didn't provide the country in that skeletal record. Um, this step is for you so that you can search those OCR text strings for things like the word Leon, which is again that county that we're focused on in this example. You can keep track of where you're at in the uh, processing by clicking on processes uh, in the in biospecs, and it'll tell you roughly um, where you're at. Once you have subjects uploaded to the project, you click on Create Expeditions, and it's asking you for just a little information, a title, description, and keywords. And then it's giving you what is essentially a worksheet like you'd work with in Excel to um, work through those specimens. You don't have to touch every specimen, but you're essentially finding those things that are relevant to the focus of the expedition. You can see there, this is what you start out with. You have 4 columns. You know whether it's been assigned or not. There's an ID that's coming, um, in this case, from Cernac's portal. Uh, you have in that 3rd column the ability to view a thumbnail or a full image of the specimen. And then you have the OCR text string, which again is a column that you can search. Uh, you can search on if you're looking for things that you don't otherwise know about the specimens. If you click on that icon down there, you can change the columns that you see. In this case, I'm suspicious. I think some of the records are complete in the Cernac portal uh, for the Leon County specimens. So I'm going to add occurrence year to what I'm seeing. And when I do that and I click on the header, it'll sort. And you can see there that I do in fact have collection year for some of these. And I'm just going to assume that those are complete records. And I'm not going to bundle those up. And I do that by um, searching. And you can see there's a magnifying glass there in the screenshot. In this search, I'm just going to say, give me things that for which occurrence year does not contain the number 1 or the number 2, and the assigned equals no. And when I do that, I get the set that I'm interested in bundling up for this particular expedition on Notes from Nature. I click on that box and I add everything. And in this case, I'm ending up with 815 subjects in my expedition. I update, and there you can see a 3rd row in the expeditions. Now, I did not process that yet. I'm holding back on that because I'm not quite ready. I haven't organized the digitization party yet for that, and I might actually delete it and restart it. This was something that I was doing for this particular webinar. But I will show you what happens once you process it. You get a download icon there, and that download icon gives you the ability to get a zip, and the zip is going to provide everything that you need for Notes from Nature. Uh, all of the images are sized to the right size, as well as a CSV file that is a manifest describing the um, images, what we know about the images in that set. And you can see here it's providing information about it's providing the institution code, collection code, catalog number. These are all things that are important for um, following those particular specimens through the process. These two expeditions were both created in that way. Um, Once there's been some progress on the expeditions, you can, as I said, uh, um, you can, as I said earlier, these information icons go back to the project page at Biospecs. In this case, once you've made some progress on them, you can see activity through time in a fairly sophisticated way. This is not the same two expeditions. We dig FL plants project, but this is a different project that was done with the version 1 that's from Nature. But it's a fairly sophisticated visualization that those crowdsourcers might be really interested in. For iDigBio. iDigBio is coming up. This was screenshot was taken maybe 2 days ago. We might be at day 126 prior to iDigBio, but information on the exact timing and resources for preparing for iDigBio are at the idigbio.org website. So to make things a little bit more sophisticated here, in summary, there are some steps involving digital imaging, GUIDs, and record creation in specimen data management systems that need to be done whether you are going to be engaging volunteers in transcription or not. But we do ask that you've done that prior to going out and tapping those volunteer groups. So you're going to be doing that prior to Biospecs and Notes from Nature and iDigBio. And that was the on-ramp. The off-ramp involves steps involving transcription reconciliation, data cleaning at Notes from Nature and Biospecs, export of Darwin Core archives at Biospecs, and ingestion of those same archives at specimen data management systems to bring things full circle. So my suggestions, and I'm assuming that many in the group here are from small collections, is my suggestion to you would be to start by creating a Biospecs project focused on your bio collection. Package the tasks, the expeditions, in ways exciting to your local community. For example, specimens from your home county, and host a digitization party for your local community using resources at idigbio.org. Ideally, this would happen during iDigBio, so that you could benefit from all that it represents, including the broader media push, but it need not happen at the time. Later, it would be fantastic if we had a few people that saw connections between parts of the specimen space and particular potential partners, and went on to develop those partnerships to create WeDig interest groups. It'd be nice if we had, if we were covering a lot more of this space by engaging volunteers in the process of digitization for all those reasons that I talked about at the beginning, involving education and outreach and other things. You might notice that you have points of overlap in these slices. If you're doing all this within a single system like Biospecs, Biospecs can keep track of that so that you're not asking for the same specimens to be transcribed by at different times in different projects. I'd like to finally acknowledge a lot of people who have put time into these projects, especially Libby. Libby Elwood has been involved, deeply involved in everything that we've talked about here. I'll stop there and answer any questions.
Thank you so much, Austin. That was a very informative, detailed talk that I know many people will be referencing in the recording as well. So thank you for including all that information. And we do have a couple of questions. And I may have inadvertently just answered one from Helen, who asks if the webinar will be archived and available later. And yes, it will be. You can find links to this webinar and the past webinars as well on the ENO wiki, which you can navigate to from the iDigBio.org page, and that will have this recording available just after this webinar. So definitely refer to that. And another question here from Andrea. She says, I'd like to assign Notes from Nature transcription as extra credit for my class this fall semester between October 20 to 23, which is the iDigBio time. Is there a way to get a report of my students' participation in iDigBio?
That is an excellent question. For the ABI development that was funded for Notes from Nature and Biospecs, we have plans for introducing event as something in our data model so that someone who is an organizer of an event can get a report that provides the um, participant names and their activity. But at this point, we don't do that. Now, I do that same thing, and I have access to the data, so I just have them tell me what their username is, and I go in and look during that period. You know, it's a relatively short period in time, and there aren't going to be many additional users. Um, well, in my experience, there weren't a lot of additional users, but I realize that it's during iDigBio, so there will potentially be a bunch of additional users. But if you'd like to do that, I'd be happy to give you a slice of the data that is happening during the time that your class is doing this. Um, I guess this could be something that you're doing out of class. I actually do it in, and so the time period would be much greater, but I actually do it in a computer lab during my lecture time, and it's a shared experience, and it's something that we discuss. There are questions that I ask them, things that I ask them to focus on. Then we have a discussion at the end of the class. We talk about um, the kinds of biodiversity information that people record and how they're recording it and how, you know, ambiguities that they found and how they could have been clarified. And so it's an introduction to best practices as well. And I do it with my field botany class. So if you do it, please contact me and I'll try to make that work for you.
Great, thanks, Austin. It sounds like she responded with, I will have an in-person event outside of class, but need to have remote virtual capability for my students. And thanks. And we have another question here from Mario Wynn. It says, I would love to start an interest group in San Diego. I'm working with a small and unincorporated herbarium here, and iDigBio seems like the perfect solution to some of these issues I have run into. Can you elaborate on some of the techniques you use to get the specimens digitized? I am working with minimal resources. Plenty of work still to do, but thank you for discussing this vital platform.
That's a great question. We have experimented with um, volunteer parties for digital imaging. So we haven't just done our events in computer labs with the transcription platforms. We've actually had volunteers in the herbarium working at, we were able to scrape together with Gil's help 3 imaging stations, and we had 30, I believe it was 30 volunteers working, or 22 volunteers working over 2 4-hour shifts on a Saturday, and we imaged 3,000 specimens, which was fantastic. It was really fantastic. But it was scary, and I would not actually recommend trying to do it at that scale. Um, you know, so many things could have broke, not necessarily broke irreparably, but could have broke in that process, and it was just a lot to supervise. So if it's a smaller group in one imaging station, and that's a way potentially to create some data to put on these crowdsourcing platforms.
Thanks. And Teresa asks, do you have a list of your discussion questions for your class, which Erica Krimmel responded to. And thank you, Erica, saying that there's an undergraduate lesson plan for use with iDigBio that's available on the website, and she included the link there to that. And I will also add that we are working on additional educational resources for iDigBio, which you could also find at that link. And Austin, do you want to address that at all also?
Oh, that's exactly where I would have suggested she visit the iDigBio resources. That's where um, there might have been one or two additional things that I thought to do, and have since forgotten about them. And that's a lesson I think we should, you know, if you do other things, it'd be really great to share them. I didn't do that, and so now I've forgotten what I did. But most of what I did is there. Uh, that's the value of this kind of coordination across a large group. When in the iDigBio group, if we're all working on the creating resources that we can all benefit from, it brings everybody that much closer to uh, meeting all their digitization needs.
Yes, and Teresa Mayfield brings up we may need a wiki for sharing educational exercises.
Yeah, it's a great idea.
Yeah. Helen would like to know how she can get info about equipment needed to set up an imaging station.
I would suggest, Helen, that you um, contact Gil Nelson. Um, there are resources at idigbio.org and at the small collections website that I showed a screenshot of that you could look at. But Gil might be Gil has actually added something there. And that's, I don't know, maybe that's uh, the recent paper that put it all together in terms of protocols for digitization.
Yes, that's that link, and Gary Mott's also supplied a nice link too. So you could dig around in there and hopefully get your answers. And it looks like we have oh, Helen says thanks. And are there any other questions? All right, well, I believe that's a wrap then. We have a couple more people typing. I'll give them a second. And while they're doing so, I'll remind folks that we do have this being recorded. And Deb's raised her hand. Deb, I'll let you turn on your mic there.
Hi, Libby. Hi, everybody. I was wondering, and I didn't hear that get mentioned. I think we talked a little bit at the meeting about having people who've been through this process before kind of mentor people that want to do it for the first time. So I don't know if we've made that formal or not, but just letting people know here, if this is the first year kind of learning about finding out what you can do, to know that there are prior people from last year who would be willing to help you. And they're all over the place. They're not just all at iDigBio. They're all over the U.S. They're all over the world. So.
That's a really great point, Deb. And I would suggest that Libby be the contact person for that if you're interested in um, having either being a mentor or having a mentor in the process. She can do the matchmaking, I would think.
Yeah, it sounds
Definitely.
great. That you guys will all find. I mean, some of these people had amazing, the lessons learned, kind of what we would do, and that you guys can all take advantage of.
There's a question I'm seeing about the
Yes.
OCR. It's using Tesseract.
Yeah, we have some other links in there too for more information about imaging. So thank you, Gail, for putting all those in too. Teresa Mayfield says, once you have images, to where do you recommend they be uploaded?
Well, we are not an image repository, so you won't be uploading it to us. All we really need is a URL for accessing each of those images. This is one of those hard questions that you have to answer prior to, at the beginning of all this process. Perhaps Gil has some suggestions. If you are involved in a TCN, the TCN will have a data management plan that answers that question. Gil says NANCH.org, North American Network of Small Herbaria is good if you're an herbarium. If you're not an herbarium, um, there are other possibilities, and I would encourage you to uh, ask Gil Nelson.
Yes, Gil also recommends csvcall.org for birds.
I was going to
Yes, Deb.
refer back to Gary's question and get clarification from you and Austin. He's asking about OCR, and you guys were talking about Tesseract, but is it also true that if I have specimens that images and I already have OCR output for them, that I can include that as a text field for each record in my upload?
Yes. Yeah, you could include that in the Darwin Core Archive, and then it'll be available to you in the worksheet in Biospec.
Yeah. Okay. So Gary, I hope that helps clarify that.
Thanks, Deb. Okay, while folks are typing there, I will just remind everybody that we do have the survey that is very short and quick and very helpful to us. And Jillian posted it in the chat, and it's also in the notes. So when we're done here in just a minute, please navigate over there and give us a second of your time to complete that. And folks are still typing. And thank you, Austin, for a great presentation. That was very informative, very helpful. And thank you to Molly Phillips of iDigBio for organizing, and Gil Nelson and Anna Monfils of the Small Collections Network for working with Molly on organizing this, and Kevin for technical support. And the ENO webinar series is on summer vacation after this, but please do follow the ENO wiki for updates about the fall webinar schedule, which Molly I know is actively putting together now. And we have another question just in. Gary asks, are the OCR uploads via Darwin Core submitted as links in the same manner as the images?
I am suggesting that Gary and I talk about the fairly technical questions offline in terms of off of this webinar. Gary, I'm happy to have a much longer conversation with you about that.
Yes, and please do contact any of us if you'd like to follow up with more specific or detailed information. And I know Austin and myself and those affiliated with Biospecs and iDigBio and all of that would be more than happy to correspond with you guys about all your questions. So don't hesitate to do that. And unless there are any other announcements or comments, I believe that's a wrap. Thank you all for participating, for listening in, for helping make this a success. Is there any other announcements, Molly?
No, that's great. Thanks so much, everybody, for coming.
Thanks, everybody.
Yes, thank you, everyone, for your time.
Nice to meet you, Megan. Glad that you're a new collection manager. Welcome to the community.
Bye.
Bye, everybody.